Welcome. We're diving into one of the most important novels in American literature, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. We're going to break down its world, its characters, and the really powerful moral questions it leaves us with. Right from the get-go, the novel just drops us into its setting. And you have to understand, Maycomb, Alabama isn't just a place. It's practically a character itself. It's steeped in tradition, sure, but it's also got this feeling of being stuck. And that sense of stagnation, it's going to drive so much of the story's conflict.
So, at its heart, this book is what you'd call a Bildungsroman. Now, that's just a fancy literary term for a coming-of-age story. And that's exactly what we're watching unfold here. Our main character's journey from the simple black and white world of childhood to a much more complicated and honestly often painful adult understanding of things.
Okay, so to really get this story, you first have to get the world it's set in. We're talking about the American South during the Great Depression. And this isn't just some background noise, it's the engine that fuels every single conflict in the book.
The story takes place between 1933 and 1935. Now think about what's happening then. The whole country is reeling from the economic collapse after the Wall Street crash. And on top of that, you've got this deep-seated racial prejudice, which was tragically highlighted by real-world events like the Scottsboro case.
The sheer scale of the economic hardship is just staggering. We're talking about 13 million people unemployed. Now, that kind of widespread poverty, it doesn't just create hardship, it creates fear. And that fear just poured gasoline on the existing social tensions, making it way easier to blame and scapegoat other people, especially along racial and class lines.
And this whole era was governed by something called Jim Crow laws. I mean, this was a society of strict, legally enforced racial segregation. Black citizens had separate everything. Schools, churches, you name it. They were even forced to sit up in the courthouse balcony. Justice was often shaped more by local customs and racial bias than by any actual rules of law.
So how does a world like this shape the people who live in it? Well, we get to experience Maycomb through the eyes of this young, really curious girl, and she's our guide to the characters at the very heart of the story.
Our narrator and protagonist is the one and only Jean Louise Finch, but pretty much everyone just calls her Scout. Scout is whip-smart. She's a bit of a tomboy, and she starts the story believing that deep down, people are fundamentally good. We see everything through her eyes as she slowly, piece by piece, loses that childhood innocence and has to grapple with the hypocrisy and injustice of the adult world all around her. Now, Scout's father, Atticus Finch, he's the moral cornerstone of this entire story. He's a lawyer, and he serves as a guide for his kids, and really, for us, the readers, on what it actually means to live with integrity. He teaches his children that real courage, well, it's not about physical strength, it's not about a man with a gun in his hand, it's about fighting for what's right, especially when you know you're probably going to lose. It's just this incredible definition of moral courage. And then you've got the neighborhood mystery, the reclusive Arthur Boo Radley. To the kids, he's this malevolent phantom, a source of pure terror that's just fueled by town gossip. This whole subplot gives the novel this really cool Southern Gothic vibe, a style that often features these mysterious, almost grotesque characters, and a sense of decaying social order.
Okay, so you have this backdrop of poverty and prejudice. You've got these characters, Scout's innocence, Atticus's integrity, and Boo's mystery, and it all comes to a boiling point in the novel's central conflict, the trial of Tom Robinson.
So the trial basically unfolds in 4 key stages. It all starts with a false accusation, one that's really rooted in poverty and shame. Then it moves through Atticus's really careful, logical defense. And then it gets to a verdict that has almost nothing to do with the evidence and everything to do with the town's prejudice, which leads to this tragic and sadly pretty predictable ending. So here's the crucial point. The trial isn't really just about the law. It's more like a public performance. The courthouse becomes a stage where the town's social prejudices get to completely overrule justice, all to preserve a social order that's built on white supremacy. This profound injustice is captured perfectly by the novel's most powerful and famous symbol, which is, of course, where the book gets its title. Atticus teaches the children this simple but incredibly profound moral lesson. It's a sin to harm innocent creatures that only bring good into the world. And this idea right here becomes the central metaphor for understanding the novel's deepest themes.
And this is just a brilliant way to show how prejudice destroys innocence in two totally different ways. You see, Tom Robinson is a mockingbird who's destroyed by a public evil, the systemic racism of the law and society. But Boo Radley, he's a mockingbird who's harmed by a private evil, the quiet cruelty of gossip, fear, and forced isolation. Both of them are innocent, and both of them are victims.
The entire story, Tom's trial, the whole mystery of Boo, all of it, every single bit, builds toward one profound moral lesson for Scout, and for us too. This right here is Atticus's most important lesson, and it is the absolute core of the entire novel: empathy, the radical, sometimes really challenging act of trying to see the world from somebody else's perspective.
Scout's journey from innocence to experience. The whole point of this building's roman, it's complete in this one moment. She finally stands on Boo Radley's porch, and for the first time, she truly sees her town and its people the way he has seen them all along, and in that instant, her perspective shifts forever. She learns that the world isn't simple. It's not just good guys and bad guys. The same neighbors who show her kindness can also form a lynch mob. She learns that the line between good and evil runs right through the middle of every single human heart.
And that leaves us with this powerful final question. The formal, rigid system of law completely failed to protect Tom Robinson. But at the end of the book, the sheriff bends that exact same law to protect Boo Radley. And it forces us to ask, what's the difference between law and justice? And in a flawed world, what does it truly mean to protect the innocent?